I'm making this announcement in compliance with the Open Public Meeting Act, being Chapter 231, Public Law 1975, laws of the state of New Jersey. The Planning Board Secretary has prepared a schedule of the meeting of the Planning Board of the Borough of Kenilworth for the year 2018 and has posted a true copy of this schedule on the bulletin board located at the front entrance of the Borough Hall and has mailed true copies of this schedule to the local source and Star Ledger and is maintaining a copy of this schedule in Borough Hall. Accordingly, the notice requirements of the Open Public Meetings Act have been satisfied in regards to this meeting. Can we all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Shelby?
Present.
Mr. Paserno?
Here.
Mr. David?
Here.
Mr. Campari is excused. Mr. Grimaldi?
Here.
Mr. Cantina?
Here.
Mr. Ladowdy is absent. Mr. Colella?
Here.
Mr. Mazzio?
Here.
And Mr. Jones?
Here. Before I get started, there's an envelope here from Mr. Ladowdy. Mr. Shelby here? Do you want to grab that? I should. I don't know if it's personal. Motion for approval of the April 12th minutes?
Motion.
Second. Made by Mr. Shelby, seconded by Mr. Grimaldi. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Any communications, Kathy?
Yes. We had a resignation letter from Mr. Rui Pinto, resigning from the board. A letter was received from Robert Donovan in regards to Precision Escalator Products. And a letter from Dominic Reggio requesting an extension of time to June 14th for the board to consider and decide on his application.
Okay. So, I don't believe we have any comments. Everybody knows what's going on with that. So we're going to move right into, yes, sir.
Reggio actually does not have an application before the board at this moment, so he is not noticed.
What do you mean? I thought he
He
did.
continues to fail to notice.
Okay.
So he's got a pending application, but until he notices, he doesn't have a date. So he never had tonight, he never had last month, since he never noticed.
So he's done.
Well, he's got to start, actually.
So he doesn't need an extension.
So he-
Yes, we don't need an extension, he started.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. So we'll read that next month as well. Maybe he'll start.
So this is actually administrative, when he,
So somebody should send him a letter and find out what's going on. Correct?
very well, Chairman.
Can we do that, Kathy?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay. New business, application 366, 518, Precision Escalator Products, 2 Mark Road. Right?
That's new business or old
Some new business, that's new, well, that's new business. That's new business, there's no old business. That's you guys.
Okay, or innuendo, I know, that's okay.
Well, you're the new old people, and we just can't wait to hear you.
Oh, I thank you. Well, we're happy to be here. Thank you for allowing us the time to make the revisions. I think everybody has received them. We appreciated everyone's comments, the professionals' comments. We had comments from the neighbor, the objector, Mr. Donovan.
If you don't mind, we were joking around, but I think maybe we should get your name and everything for the record. Why
Sure,
don't you-
yes, you're right. Meredith Marcus, MARCUS, from Hale & Hale, on behalf of the applicant, Precision Escalator. I have with me our professionals tonight, Eric Ballou from Insight Engineering, is our engineer, David Collins is our architect, and Allison Kaufman is our planner. So she'll be addressing the variance requirements criteria.
Okay,
Okay?
let's get it rolling.
Yes, so I will not be repetitive because I know that these gentlemen are going to go through the revisions, probably much more detailed than I will. I do, just as you know, we received a letter from Mr. Donovan, so we did work with him over the last month to try and resolve differences and any concerns that they had. So he may speak at the end of our application and just kind of put it on the record on what his position is. So I will send it over to you, Eric.
Great, so,
Mr. Collins, you are still under oath from the April 12th meeting.
Understood.
All right, thank you. And for the record, it's David Collins.
Eric Collier.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Eric Collier
Wrong.
from Inside Engineering.
Yeah, Mr. Booth, you're still on, and you're qualified as an engineer.
I appreciate that, thank you. Do we have the exhibits that I brought last time? Because maybe it'd be good to show a contrast for what the rendering looked like before and after, if that's of value to you.
Do we have that inside, Ted?
I believe they may be in the building department.
I guess if that's,
If it's difficult, I can just, it hasn't been that long.
Can we get them? I would like that to happen. That would be good, if we can grab them.
And then when she gets back, we'll have to mark a new exhibit, so I don't know what we're up to.
We're up to A8.
So this one will be A8?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Bob. There's no, this tripod.
So two exhibits I have are exhibit A4 to my right, to your right, is A4, that's the previously rendered site plan that we have. And the new exhibit we have is exhibit A8, that's a rendered site plan based upon the current site plan that you have in front of you. So it gives you like a bit. So we'll go through some building changes first. The first building change we did is that we actually cut back the building where the loading area was. So previously, we had a zero setback variance, because we actually extended the loading dock area all the way to the property line. Exhibit AA, you can see we actually cut that back. So we actually removed that bump out. So we do not have that front setback violation in this area. The other goal was try to get the big trucks, when they're actually utilizing the loading dock area, to make sure they're going to be off of the actual public right-of-way onto our property. So what we did to address that, based on the discussions that we had, we actually have taken this building and actually shifted it 5 feet towards the back. So here we had a 10-foot setback previously, now this whole building has been shifted back. And the benefits of that was, and actually, before we had on this irregular corner, we had a setback of like a little less than 4 feet. Now we have over 8 feet of setback. Even at this irregular corner, we're very close to being compliant with the front yard setback. When we shifted the building back, it actually allowed us to actually expand the parking lot area. So when we were here before, we had a parking demand of 23 spaces. We were actually providing 15. So we're going for a variance to be deficit about 8 spaces. With this new design and this redesigned building, we're required to have 20 spaces based upon the warehouse and office use that's listed on the plans. What we're providing now is 22 spaces. So we're actually, based upon the plans that have been submitted, we actually exceed the parking requirement, and therefore removing our variance request for parking. So how did we get it? First thing we did on this parking lot here, since the building moved back, it allowed us actually to make the parking lot larger. So we're actually able to get 18 spaces there. So then to make up another 4 spaces, we actually still have a walkway along the frontage, but then we actually have 4 spaces parallel to Mark Road, but on private property, so they're controlled by us. We found that, we looked at other designs, such as doing perpendicular parking and having vehicles back up onto Mark Road. We don't like that concept. Backing up into a road with large trucks is unsafe. So we came up with a parallel solution to meet our parking requirements and provide safe parking along Mark Road. The other changes that we did was regards to lighting. So in regards to lighting, we actually lowered this fixture and even changed the tilt angle a little bit for the parking, the one light that lights the entire parking lot area. Then we added a couple lights, one above the loading dock area and one above the entry. One is actually sort of to highlight the sign that's there, and then the other one is the light above the loading dock area. These are really more decorative type fixtures. The larger fixture for the parking lot is like 200 watts. The two on the front part of the building are only actually 25 watt lights. They're all LED, but they're very low wattage. So it's mostly just to shine some light up against the building, not to over illuminate the area. We do have a walkway, so we shifted the walkway over to make room for the parking spaces. And what we did on that, we actually just put like typical, almost like landscape walkway lighting. So it's a little 3-foot lights that have little decorative fixtures on there. So it's really just isolating the lighting of the actual walkway itself. So that's how we changed some lighting aspects as well. Solid waste. We actually now have a couple garbage cans outside of the building on a concrete pad at the back of the property. And that's basically just for garbage for basically the employees' use, for like their lunchtime use and things of that nature. If the operations had a large trash use, they have plenty of access to actually put a dumpster actually inside of the building. So this would really just be mostly for like lunchtime type of garbage that the owner will take care of. So that's how we address that. So those were the changes. And there were some effects on our zoning compliance though based upon those changes. Our lot depth variance that we talked about before, that remains unchanged. Also the difference between the access road, the access for the parking lot, and the loading area, that should remain unchanged as well. 30 required, we're around 27 and a half. Front yard setback, we improved the front yard setback, but we still are asking for a variance. Because even though we're compliant for, you'd say here usually probably 95% of the building, there is a small corner here that we still are going for a slight front yard setback variance. We're at 8.4, where it's required 10. So there's still a front yard setback, but much better than before. One of the new setback variances though is the rear yard setback. This property right now butts up to a large parking lot behind us. We're not really infringing on anyone's rights at the back of our property. But our building is set back 5 foot off the property line, where your ordinance requests 10 feet. So that is a variance that's been added to this application. The other items, building coverage, we spoke about that before. That was a variance. We're closer to compliance now because our building footprint got smaller since we actually chopped off this area. And when you look at building coverage, we're over by about 1,550 square feet. That's sort of what we're over for allowable. And then when you look at it though, most of it is doing a covered loading dock. The covered loading dock is about 1,350 square feet. So if we didn't have we had an uncovered loading dock, our coverage would be within like 200 square feet. So it's really the covered loading dock aspect, which we think is really good for the operations, is really why we're over on building coverage. When you add more parking, you definitely get into adding some more coverage. So right now, your ordinance allows 80% impervious coverage. We're at 83.6%. I would like to note though, like the previous development was over 93%. So we've actually still improving over what was previously there, but we have a slight exceedance of your ordinance. Conversely, there's two criteria. They do maximum impervious area of 80%, then they have a directly related 20% open space. So if you violate either one, you're really into two variances. So we're asking for a variance for open space as well, because you need 20% where we're at 16.4%. Previous development had about 6% of actual open space. So even though we're asking for relief, these are still all situations that are better than the previous building that occupied and operated this facility. Meredith, did I miss anything here?
I think Kevin had, and I know if I don't cover it, Mr. O'Brien will. The downspouts, there was a question about the removal of the downspouts.
That was more of an architectural decision.
That's for David.
But what happened is now the roof pitches from the front to the back. So the downspouts are located in the back of the building where we actually revised our storm sewer system to pick up all of the downspouts, all the roof water now is being picked up and directed into our stormwater management system within the basin. I think last time, my last report, we actually captured like half the building, where we revised that report, put another pipe in, we got the whole roof in there now.
Okay. I think that's all I have. Kevin, I'm gonna defer to you because you have some questions about lighting. So I don't know if what Mr. Balloon went through, if that answers your questions about what type of fixtures, or if you want more information on that.
Your explanation was helpful about the sign, particularly over, about the light, particularly over the sign. And because that's such a low wattage, that explains the very low isometric numbers below it.
That's correct.
That did seem only.
Right, this light actually is 26 feet above grade, and it's above the sign that you'll see in the architectural plan to sort of light that sign. So it's low wattage at a higher elevation.
Is there any other illumination to that sign?
I'm gonna let the architect address that.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much, Councilman.
That's all I have in my notes, just to let the board know. Our architect is going to go through the other half of the concerns that the board has. So it's up to you whether you want to hear all of it and then question.
I have a question for Mr. Balloon. In your last visit here, we were talking about Mark Road and if there was off-street parking on Mark Road. Did you find that out?
Yeah, I think Kevin related to that off-street, that parking is allowed on Mark Road.
Okay.
It is. But when you look at the situation, is Mark Road's about 28 to 30 feet wide. It's really too narrow to actually start introducing parallel parking. I think the situation you see all the way through Mark Road on both sides is that you see people park perpendicular on that street. So there's really no room actually to do parallel parking actually on the street as it presently exists in a safe manner, especially when it's about the truck traffic.
So those 4 cars that you have running parallel to the building in tandem, you're going to have a curb cut there coming in one side, going out the other, or it's going to be completely depressed?
It'll be similar to what's across the street. It'll be 1.5 inch reveal. So yeah, so it'll be basically depressed with 1.5 inch reveal curve.
Okay.
I noticed that the new exhibit doesn't show the office space. Is there a reason for that, or is...
No, I just thought there was probably, that the office space is still on the architectural plans that we'll go through. Just for this exhibit, because I know we got through a conflict with numbers and everything like that, so I wanted to keep this as a clean plan and let all the architectural square footages stay on that plan. So it's just a simplification. The office is still there on the architectural plans.
Question.
Just go ahead, Mr.
Have you, would you say, Mr. Regal, we're up to 8?
8A.
Have you,
Exhibit on the left is
Right.
8A.
have you developed a scenario to comply with the ordinances? No variances?
No, we did not complete that. We
Okay,
did not do that.
so you said you were short 1,500 feet. So roughly, that's what, 20 feet off the right, or 10 feet off the back, 8 feet off the back?
Yeah, I'd say about 10 feet or so off the back or more.
And before I ask you a question, why didn't you do that? How would that affect, if you did comply with those two, with the building coverage, I guess the building coverage would be comply with the impervious and then the open space, and you wouldn't need, the only variance you need would be lot depth?
And there would probably be some front yard setback possibly still.
Well,
Depending on if they took away.
Yeah, depending on where you reduce the building, you'd either, you might have to satisfy that too. Understanding you push the building back and the larger trucks are no longer hanging over the front, which is a good thing. Where it is right now, and I think on the turning movements on the next page, is the depth that you have it at right now critical to the truck staying in the building?
It is. It's pretty close, correct.
So if you did reduce it, and I'm not telling you how to reduce it, but if you did reduce it and you didn't reduce it in that corner, in the southwest corner, you'd still be able to possibly take it. If you didn't reduce it over there, if you did like, I don't know, again, I guess you'd want to keep it rectangular. If you either reduced it in the back or on the east side, I mean, how would you respond to how's that going to affect your working area? Obviously, it's going to be
And it's
smaller.
going to decrease it. I mean, the applicant really needs this size building to properly do his operations. So by making the building smaller, then it becomes maybe not feasible for this project to actually work for this applicant.
But you are starting from scratch, and you're only off by about 3%.
Just operations, that could be submitted.
Just
Right. Understood.
just making a statement.
You understand?
Okay, it's my 2 cents. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, seeing none, why don't we hear from your architect?
Okay, great.
Mr. Collins, you are also still on the road from the April 12th meeting.
Mark this A9, this revised architectural drawing.
Is that what we have already?
This is the revised, this isn't the original one. The original one that was marked in last time this year, so this has been revised.
A9.
Let's have a rendering, we'll just mark it A10.
Sure.
Okay, so first I'd like to say thank you to the board for the comments at the last meeting. I think it was very constructive, helped us quite a bit, made some, I think, very beneficial changes to the project. As Eric said, we've taken the piece facing Mark Road and removed it, so the building is now more regular, more square. And we've also really focused on the part that you see coming down Mark Road, which is the entrance to the office area. What we've done is we've tried to consolidate the design a little bit because cost is a big concern of my clients. We had to really try to get the most bang for our buck. So what we did is we created this different treatment of the facade in the office area at the corner. And this corner is very visible as you come down Mark Road. What we've done is we actually lowered the masonry here to change the height, and we added some banding, and we treated this with an ephes or stucco finish with a cornice line and some trim lines, and we also actually recessed the entry doors into the building, which was a suggestion of one of the board members, which I think gives some nice depth to that building. So if you're looking on the north corner of the building and the east corner, you can see that same treatment is set back to kind of capture the corner. Referring to A10, this is a rendering. We did our best to fit the model into an actual photograph from the street. The scale is not 100% perfect, but it's pretty close. At least it gives you the idea of the way this building looks. And what I think is important about this exhibit is I'm standing in the middle of Mark Road. The entrance to the industrial park is to my back. So everybody that comes into that industrial park comes down Mark Road. This is what they'll see. Our neighboring building is set back, so you can see how exposed this part of the building is. So I think that this treatment works really nice to mark the corner and create a nice entry here. We have as a ramp system. We pulled the ramp away from the front of the building, and we've concealed it behind a low garden wall and some plantings. And because of that, we just have to have a simple little rail, which you can barely see in this rendering. We come in at grade, go up the ramp, come in this office door on the side so that we're barrier-free. We're barrier-free on the west side as well because the parking lot slopes up to meet the at-grade drive-in. So we have both sides of the building and a complete interior path for barrier-free access. A couple of the other changes that we made, as Eric spoke about earlier, is we changed this to a single pitched roof. Helped us a lot with drainage, helped us get a lot of the leaders and gutters out of sight into the back of the building. Because of the grade, it was much easier to connect into the storm system that way. So you look at the west elevation, you'll see that this building is high on Mark Road and slightly slopes back at 1/2 inch on 12 to the back of the building. And although we show this in this drawing as a flat parapet, we'd actually prefer to keep this at the pitched angle with the rake trims the same way as the west side, if the board is okay with that. It will...
Mr. Collins, would you back up to that last statement, please?
Sure. The west side, the rake trims on the exterior match the line of the roof slope.
Okay.
So they're slightly sloping down. We originally intended to keep the east side, as a flat parapet with a thin coping at the top. But it actually, in retrospect and thinking about it a little bit more, this dotted line that you see here is actually the line of the roof beyond that parapet. And we'd actually like to follow that with a nice rake trim to match the rake trim that we showed on the west side. So one of the comments was that we didn't really treat the west side heavily architecturally, and that is intentional. It's because of cost. But I think that it's a better alternative because Mark Road is a dead-end road, and there's not a lot of people there's a lot of people that travel into the park and see the building the way that we see it in Exhibit A10. But this road dead ends down here at this building. Sydney comes across, but this dead ends. So there's not as many people coming back the other way. So we felt it was appropriate to spend the money on this piece. There's also a question about windows in the old exhibit. I have an exhibit number on this. I didn't write it on there last time. In the old design, we did have windows on the south side, and we've eliminated those again for cost. Probably better that we just have the windows on the north side. The lights more even coming into the warehouse. So we've kept the windows along the north side, but eliminated them on the south side of the building. Materials are still the same, essentially. We have metal panel, decorative block along the base, and of course we're introducing this EFIS. For the file, I brought, just so all our color samples are all together. This is the colors, the one that you're missing, the one material that we added. So we have that as kind of a basalt. You can pass it, sure. You put the file.
Are they the same, Mr. Collins? The one that you just handed to Kathy and the one...
They're the same.
Okay, so we should probably mark that as A11.
I also have some small renderings if anyone wants to get a closer look.
Yeah, I was going to offer to pass that around.
If you have them, pass them.
Yeah. Yeah, because I don't think you can see from here the texture.
Yeah, that's part of A10.
Yeah.
What color are you looking at, Mr. Collins, when I look at this?
What is it in the red cloud?
Oh, okay, I didn't see it there. I don't feel bad. Vice Chair also was looking for it.
So we've also updated the finish schedule to include that new material, the EFIS, this guy's basalt, which is shown there. The floor plan, except for the removal of the portion of the loading dock that was taking up to that zero lot line in the front, the layout's generally the same. The office configuration adjusted ever so slightly. We actually had 3 bathrooms, we changed to 2. We pushed these lines around in here to get this ADA access into the back, but the key is we still have 2,040 square feet of office area, future office area dedicated to the building, the balance being warehouse and loading dock area, which we've labeled here. Loading dock is 1,350, the warehouse area is 11,450, and the office area is 2,040.
Mr. Collins, what is the height of that new front facade there?
So we, based on your ordinance, we took the existing average grade, which is 94.5, and we went 40 feet to that top piece there. So we're only at 37.4, and then we're 40 just for this little piece.
And what does it drop down to on that rate board?
Well, from finished floor, it's 32, but if you were to average from an existing grade, it's probably closer to 34. but the reality is finished floor is 32.
Thank you.
And that's within the limits of the ordinance?
Yes.
Okay.
Are you done?
I'm done, sorry.
Any questions?
I have a question. Were you going to address if the sign is lit on the front of the building?
Yes.
We had a question on that.
So we had originally proposed an internally lit sign, which we followed your regulations. We have the wall area of 6,000 square feet, we have 100 square feet, but the reality is we can eliminate the internal illumination since we have this decorative light fixture directly over it, and that was our intent in the revision. So if the board prefers just to have it lit with this one light, that's fine.
Anyone else have any questions for Mr. Collins?
Is there a reason to have both lights? Is there a reason to have both lights, both internal and above?
There's no reason to have both. We could eliminate the internal once we put this fixture on. The fixture could light this on by itself.
No one has any questions?
I have a question about parking. Would we address parking question to yourself?
Probably Eric, but I can try, depends on the question.
I got so many notes here. What exactly are you asking for a parking variance? Are you asking for a parking variance?
asking.
No.
That's been completely withdrawn?
Correct.
We've eliminated the parking variance, yes.
I thought so, I just wanted to make sure. Thank you.
The overall footprint change now? What's the net difference? If the office space is the same, did the warehouse space get smaller?
Actually, the loading dock got a little bit smaller, just because this little piece that was, you can see, the small piece that was here before is now eliminated.
Exactly.
So that's the only thing that was changed in the building footprint. So basically, moving the building back
That's correct.
is the main effect.
It's sort of a footprint, yes.
In order to achieve that bump out where the loading dock was, you had to move it back so the trucks would get in and out. Correct?
Right, and it allowed the biggest trucks to be on site when they're fully backed up, which was the issue before. The issue before was that although we came out to a zero lot line, the small right-of-way piece, a little bit of that truck would have been sticking out there. Now we've resolved that by pushing the building back on the site.
And that's why you're asking for the 5-foot setback instead of the 10 that you had previously in the other drawing.
That's correct. It also makes our front yard, the front yard setback variance we need now a little bit better, and that's really due to the skewed street line and the very skewed corner, so we're really just dealing with just this one little corner now.
If I may.
Yes, sir.
The building is going to be, for all intents and purposes, a prefab steel building?
Yes.
Okay, so it is very important for you to have regular column bays and sets, and that's why you try not differing on many things. And if you wanted to do the loading area outside, you'd probably end up exposing more area outside to stay with your consistent bays of your construction type. But again, you'd be exposing the loading, the dirty loading things coming off of trucks out to the public rather than being contained inside.
That's exactly right. So this building coverage issue, you could argue is a benefit because all of those things you're talking about will be within the building, inside the building, not
And so if you were using a different building type, which we're not asking you to, but if you were using a different building type, then the 0.16 feet, we could probably adjust. It would be an easy thing for you to adjust, except for the fact that the building type you're using, it makes the structure impossible to work with to cut off 1.5 feet and go from the 6 bays being regular to 5 and then the 1 being screwed up. Taking the economics of the job into a different direction.
That's correct. There are other benefits. We have, an 80-foot clear span, so a steel rigid frame. There's a lot of benefit to having a steel rigid frame that you see in pre-engineered buildings to get that kind of span to work. It's pretty challenging to get that to work with other types of construction. So there's a lot of benefits to using a metal building in this type of situation.
Okay.
Anyone else?
I just have to go back to my question that I asked Mr. Baloo. Listening to Mr. Grimaldi's discussion with you, so again, not asking you to change a building type, but are you saying that where it may be challenging, that there's absolutely no way that you could comply with the coverage of impervious unless you change the building, unless you find something that would work, I guess, for your application?
That's kind of a loaded question, but
Well,
I think that the consideration of having the loading dock internal, in my professional opinion, is more of a benefit than to shortening the building, making that building coverage, becoming compliant with the building coverage ordinance, and then having some kind of canopy to cover a little piece of concrete that's sticking out in the back and having trucks always exposed on that west side.
I appreciate your opinion. I appreciate your experience in it. And the reason I'm asking this, again, we're a board and we're here to maintain our ordinances as much as we can. Obviously, variances are given for instances and where they're necessary. But basically, I mean, even though you refer back to the previous application use doesn't exist anymore because you have an empty lot, and you have an empty lot, and you're creating variances. So that's why I keep on pressing the issue, and I get it, but I haven't seen, like I said, I haven't seen where you even presented that, well, if we went this way, it doesn't work. So I don't know how else to ask it.
No, and it's a fair question, and it's a challenge to answer that specifically. There's a lot of factors that came into play on why we chose this building type, why we made this building look the way we made it look, so that it could function the way it's supposed to function, and it could meet our client's budget. So those are the things, the program and the budget are the things that drove us to design the building the way we did. And it's true that there are a lot of aspects of a metal building that are restrictive and a challenge to work with. But if we were forced to comply with the building coverage, we'd be forced to take this loading dock and make it exterior. It's just too, you need a certain amount of space. My client needs the space, he needs the warehouse space. I can't really take it from there, but I certainly could take it from the loading dock area. So if we have to comply, that's what I would recommend to my client.
Can you comment on that again, please?
So if you took off the last bay is 26 and a half, right? So if you took the last bay off, it'd be 26 because you still need a skin wall of the end of the building. So if you took the last bay off, it's 26 by 80, you're about 2,000 square feet. Take 2,000 square feet off.
Only need 15 for the to take off.
At that point, he basically can be in compliance with everything, but that's where, as a board, when we look at something, yes, that'll bring this building into compliance. Because at that point, he could probably shimmy over and lose his corner from there and take it away from this.
And what actually happens? This becomes open then?
Yeah, the last 26 feet would become open.
Right.
They'd have a concrete dock sticking out of it that the 67-foot tractor trailer could back up to. He'd probably have a canopy that would get beat up by some bad truck driver.
Right.
And all his stuff would come out of the box, exposed to all the neighbors, then go in a garage door.
The neighbors on that side, which are...
Well, this guy,
Got it.
this
Okay.
guy.
All right.
So in turn, in a way, I appreciate him spending more money first, rather than coming with that solution and us asking him to, why don't you clean up your act and enclose all this? So from the way I'm viewing it is that although he's looking for a variance from what we have, he's giving us a better product. The other thing I failed to mention when the engineer was up there, which I do still have a question though. in the past month, I drove down there at various times on purpose, just to see. Well, if you like your vehicle, you wouldn't park your car at that curb in front of this building right now. I still don't know if we ever found out if parking's legal there or not.
Yeah, they
It
just said
is.
It is legal?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it's legal.
It would be very intelligent, but it'd be legal.
Unadvised. but-
Yeah, it'd be unadvisable, but, and his rendering is good because when you come down, and now this building's pushed back, you have a clearer shot. That corner, you could actually see this little jog in that property line with the confines of what's sitting there right now. And it's imposing. Cleaning this whole corner up and structuring it and having it engineered and done correctly is going to bring up that corner. Having that building set back, which is something I think this board kind of insinuated to last time. And now we are 5 feet beyond the front setback. Yes, we actually kind of asked for this setback in the back. I agree with you that we could ask him to make his building smaller, but he could also then say, well, I'm going to push the building back up.
Which would cause the other
So we-
eyesore that we wanted to get rid of.
We take this away, and he gives us exactly what we asked for. Push it back up, and then we have everything making the confines of this street look more tight.
Well, actually, what I was asking for is taking the back away,
Well,
but not giving up the front, it's just to comply. But I...
he has an economic issue of his,
I
running his
understand.
company too.
You know, I'm not trying to argue the case. I understand the positions and it's not, I understand Mr. Grimaldi's discussion as well, and that makes a good argument as far as revealing what you have unloading versus having it concealed as it is. And
Because we have enough companies in the town that do that.
no, I understand, and I appreciate the revisions and the improvements made from, or the revisions made from last month's application and drawings. And, yeah, we still have some issues, but those were my concerns. But you do make a good argument about concealing, and we'll just have to think about that, but, yeah, I'm good.
Anybody else want to weigh in on that? That's great dialogue over there. There's the pros and cons of why we should and shouldn't, but when you, at the end of the day, I think Mr. Collins and his team took some of the recommendations from the board, and he not only took those, but made it even that much better by pushing it back. So where the eye line is what we really want to focus in on.
Right.
Given the fact that he's got that 5-foot setback on the parking lot side to the adjacent property, well, we would like to see 10, but I think they're making every effort in that respect. I, for one, don't really want to see things hanging off, shelters, awnings. I don't want to see that at all. That's what we're trying to eliminate.
They tend to be clutters, areas of clutter.
It's just going to be a mess house, to put it nicely.
Can I ask the engineer something?
You could ask, yeah, sure, I'll get it back up. Are you complete? Are we done asking these questions to the architect here?
I have a further question in our...
Can you hold one second?
Yeah, no,
And we'll get it back up.
Don't worry.
Okay, sure. With the removal of the downspouts from the front facade, the north facade, they did act to break up that large mass, which was broken up with the windows at the top and the brick at the bottom, but still, that's a lot of mass. Is there anything else that could be done on a horizontal scale along that facade?
On a horizontal scale or a vertical scale?
Thank you, on a vertical scale.
What are you saying? What are you going to
It's right here, Rich. There's
front
nothing
facade.
to delineate the front, it's just a mass.
Right.
Yeah.
Just a big blank wall.
Right.
So I know that economics, it really isn't the concern of the board, but One of the other drawbacks to metal buildings is the way the buildings go together. They're rigid frames and they're horizontal purlin systems, and they're really, meant to be skinned in between. Anytime you try to change the depth of the facade front to back, it's really challenging. It's a lot easier in areas where they're stucco because I could add rigid insulation, I can pump things out, I can do cornice lines, I can do a lot in these areas. But once I get into that metal panel, it's not only challenging, it's really asking for water infiltration because you're getting everything out of plane. So I'd really prefer not to put any vertical breaks, in that wall, just for the betterment of the building itself.
Okay. The east facade, thank you for for the rendering, that's very helpful. You do have some texture to that, but as you look at it coming down the street, that facade is going to be fairly prominent because now it does stick out. Is there anything you can do to that facade to break up that monolithic?
If the board wants us to, we could add a couple of clerestory windows here, at least similar to the north elevation onto that east, if the board would like us to.
I think that would balance out that building.
I would like to make a recommendation regarding the EPA system that you're deploying here. You've got a couple of reveals and some cornices. Is there a way we can maybe introduce a complementary color to the rest of the EFIS in those cornices and reveals?
Sure.
Maybe that's complementary to the applicant's color scheme, to their logo, perhaps.
So we certainly could do that. All these trims could be in the top cornice line and these horizontal trims, and the cornice line that we put up on top of the front door and this horizontal line. Probably what would be the cleanest is maybe use the same color as the metal panel, tie those together. We could certainly use the colors of the business if that's certainly an option. But we already have 3 colors on this building. Maybe we should stick to the 3 and just use this lighter gray in here, the darker gray on the stucco, and then trim it out in the lighter gray.
The way you have it proposed is just that one swatch, I believe, right? That one.
Yes, right. And so what we'll do is
there's no delineation between.
That's correct. And so what we could do is we could just match the metal panel. We can color match it exactly.
Okay.
I would suggest that isn't one of my fellow board members asking. In their logo, is it black and red?
It is.
Okay. How about a red stripe? How about a red corners? How about red something to pop? 3 shades of gray is gray. It's gray. Gray is, look, see this? There's a lot of shades there. This is all gray. All gray.
That's 50 shades.
Good point.
Okay.
Which red stripe it is.
It's an accent, and color's not scary.
I wish my client was here today.
No, I just said, Greg's not gonna know.
He'll love the red.
Yeah, the colors are, he doesn't care about that.
And last, if I may, Sharon?
Yes.
You had indicated before that all you needed was one of those lights for the signage. Which one would be the most appropriate to keep?
We were talking about there's a decorative light that's proposed over which we're going to keep, and we're not going to internally light the sign.
Okay. So no internal.
No internal light in the sign, just the decorative picture over top of it.
And that will provide enough lighting on that sign?
Yes, it actually projects off the building like a gooseneck. It's not exactly a gooseneck, but it's similar to a gooseneck.
And you think that would be better than illuminating the sign from behind?
Well, we're using this light for other reasons too, to light the facade. An internally lit sign will just light the sign, not the facade at all.
Could you also light the underneath of the overhang?
We certainly could put a recessed light underneath there, absolutely. In the top, where it's tucked in, right?
Okay.
Absolutely, we can do that.
So you could do that and keep
Absolutely.
the sign illumination and get rid of the gooseneck, perhaps.
Yes, we can. If you prefer that, we can do that.
Chairman's looking at it.
That overhead gooseneck there is going to provide more than enough light to illuminate that front door and everything. I mean,
The front door is recessed.
huh?
The front door is recessed.
Yeah.
So I would suggest that the gooseneck light would, quote, at least there's something else on the building rather than it being flat. So I'd rather the non-cabinet sign, the non-illuminated sign, some architectural piece above it, a light, so be, and a couple of cans to lighten and offer security to your front door. But I'd rather have something on there rather than a flat gray on gray on gray building.
We already got that, and we got a red stripe. Jesus. We want sprinkles? All right.
It is a comic book.
Robert, so was there agreement on adding windows too?
Yeah, on the east.
On the east side?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So symmetrically, you would have a count of windows. I think you got 6 on one side here and the other side, and you would just fit that into the scope of...
It would go one per bay.
One per bay?
I think I'm gonna have to reduce the width a little bit. These probably are a little too wide to sit inside these bays because these are 26 and these are 20. But
Okay.
I'll make that adjustment, I'll put one in each bay, make it an appropriate proportion.
That's 3 then, Robert? There's 3?
3 bays.
3 bays, 3 colors gray, and 1 stripe. Anybody else have anything? Okay, I was hoping that maybe we could talk to Eric again. You had a...
Just the engineer.
Yeah.
Are all the telephone poles, utility poles, getting removed?
No.
Relocated.
Where do they go? That's a long span.
Yeah, basically, the utility plan shows that because some of the utility plans conflict with the loading dock area, so we're gonna have to shift the wires along the area. There's still less than like 100-foot span or whatever between the stalls, we looked at that.
Okay.
Are we gonna have to do some pole relocations? Yes, to make this happen on the utility plan.
Because, yeah, it looks like there's at least one missing.
Yeah, there's about 2 poles we have to go through. Right.
Yeah.
Where the parallel stalls are, we're gonna dismantle that.
Like those 2, and then you'll have 2 here, but then this will be, okay.
Yeah, that's right, we are gonna do some pole. Okay.
I have a question.
Otherwise, I don't know, park there.
You have a question, Chris?
Eric?
Yes.
For 22 parking spaces, you only need one ADA handicap space. By New Jersey standards, that has to be inaccessible.
Right, so what we did was, so this space in our opinion is inaccessible. So what we did was, we did an 11-foot wide stall, and then you have the 5-foot landing, which is the concrete. So that, lately, the new code's been pushing us, instead of doing 8 and 8, the new ADA codes are preferring 11 and 5, because I think when they had the 8-foot wide stripes, people were parking inside the 8-foot islands. So now we're doing 11 and 5 like the last couple of years.
I'm not sure having a 5-foot aisle outside the property.
Well, it's just
Is
a,
fine.
you know, it's just a landing area, it's a flat surface area within 2%, so it's no different than a sidewalk. And at the same time, the ADA code does always promote trying to put the ADA stall as close to the actual accessible entrance as possible. So we think that this ADA stall should be located closer to probably where the office operations are, since that's probably the higher likeliness that that space would be used, is placing it near where the office area would be. It was the thoughts behind it.
I never designed one with like a space outside the property. It's always been inside regardless if it's 10 spaces or 25 spaces.
It is a little unique, and this whole area is a little unique. You have people parking up against the road, so it is a little unique. At the same time, though, the design is compliant with ADA regulations. From engineering, slope perspectives, and compliancy, it is a compliant stall.
But not exactly, because it's not on your property.
Well, I guess the ADA code doesn't really speak to, I guess, the property lines. It speaks to the ability to park there and also get out of the vehicle. And since it's a public right-of-way, they should have access to the use of that sidewalk.
But then you would be unloading from the driver's side of a vehicle, and all those vans unload from the passenger side.
You know, ADA code, a lot of times that they don't really specify. You could have one or the other. It doesn't really, even though one could be more preferential, a little bit better, they actually don't require you to have the loading zone on a particular side. I think too, a lot of times too, when you see an ADA spaces, you'll see 2 spaces. So if someone's parked in one space, you're gonna get the other no matter what you want. So this sort of follows that same logic.
Are we okay with that, Chris?
I'm looking through, I have a accessible guy.
You're not in the street.
I went through this once, it doesn't necessarily say that, but I've never,
So what would be, let's just say you're correct, right? What would be the alternative?
We would place we could actually place the striping here. Remember we have that on-grade loading area?
Right.
That's not really used except we get a forklift in whatever so often. We could actually stripe this area with it's 11 and 5, stripe this, and then they would have grade access. But then they would go through the warehouse operations
Right.
versus going through the office component, which we thought was more compatible with the ADA stuff.
So there's an alternative there.
or you can move the green area closer to the sidewalk, more towards where the parking area is now.
I actually take away some of the open space, take away some of this.
No,
here.
where the 18 spaces are. If you take the top corner,
Oh, right here?
yeah, make that, and then move that.
We would have to increase, yes, we could do that if we're willing to increase impervious area. And
I wouldn't want to take away that green area.
Yeah, I don't think so.
It's, that's right there at the eye line again, that's your curb appeal. That's what we've been looking for.
ADA also does speak to the shortest distance, and ADA, when you do ADA surveys, it speaks about getting the person to the public right of way. I've had clients that have gotten fined from entrance to parking lot and navigating the public way. And even though it's the public way, it's their route, and ADA, the DOJ has fined against that. So in this case, the public right of way is part of his solution.
Can he use the public right of way for his?
Well, I'm saying the DOJ has imposed the public right of way as a fine against you because it speaks of your route has to be accessible through, has to get you to the public right of way into a spot. So they've used it from their side. So I know it's a little unordinary, and I probably feel a little uncomfortable doing it also, but it's there.
Well, let's think about the ADA requirement. That person who would need that spot would want to be closest to the door and not so much in that back warehouse and truck through that warehouse. So we got to be, let's think.
That's 80 by 200 and something feet. The guys,
Yeah.
if they were in a wheelchair, they're...
And also too, these kinds of facilities, honestly, the ADA stalls, we think we use the least of all the stalls. So we wanted to sort of keep as much traffic off. So that was all part of the concept as well, is that the spaces within the parking lot will have the higher demand. So by putting the ADA stall here, it's really less cars on the street to play into the thought process.
Chris, you still looking?
I'm still I'm not finding anything. If this is, I'm not sure who regulates this. If someone comes by one day
Okay.
and says,
Well, here's what we have. We have an alternative route, right? So right where it's going on plan, it seems, what I'm hearing, and I don't know about the rest of the board, but what I'm hearing, it seems like it can go there. If it can't, he's got an alternative move, which I think would be somewhat ridiculous to put it back there, because that guy who's coming in is, what do you put me back here?
But I think that is a good
Yes.
point.
He certainly complies with the intent of what they're trying to do here. As a board, we have no authority to grant him the use of the right-of-way. So they can put it on the site plan, but we can't enforce it.
Have to go to the governing body for that.
Okay.
And the other thing too is, say if something say we uncover a code, right? One of us anyone here uncovers the code. You're right that we do have a retrofit solution, so our plan would still be compliant, honestly, with some striping and maybe a sign move. So if we do come across an issue, we do have a fix that can be done. These stalls are this stall will be less than 2% grading in all directions, so it'll meet the slope requirement. We'll make sure that, I know it does, it's pretty flat. So this stall will be ADA adaptable if needed.
So let's say this, if there's no code, no ordinance that you can find, or you can find, the ADA parking spot goes there. If there is, it goes to the back.
yes,
Fine? Can we move on?
yes.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay. Who else do you have?
We have our planner.
All right.
Hello.
Could you raise your right hand, please? With regard to this application, do you swear the testimony you're about to give shall be the truth?
Yes, I do.
Could you state your name, spell your last name, please?
Allison Kaufman. It's Coffin, like the box.
We're gonna have a field day.
I'm sure she's heard it.
Hey, you heard it all, huh? Awesome, Corbin. And I think, have you been before us?
No.
Could you give us a little bit about yourself?
I would laugh at that joke.
Is your father a planner?
Yes, he is.
We worked together once. What's
Jim Higgins.
Jim Higgins? Yes, yes.
Oh, your
Yes.
father's Jim Higgins.
He is.
Okay.
He is, and I work for him.
Is that all the vetting we need from this point?
I should probably say that I do have a planning license.
Okay.
And I'm certified by the AICD.
Okay.
And your license is current.
It is. I have until the end of the month to decide if I'm renewing it.
I think since everybody knows your family, we're okay to hear it.
I'm gonna let you
I'm
go.
sorry. Do you have anything to stop this coughing?
Just a minute.
Every once in a while. Go ahead.
We have a property that's 26,575 square feet. It had previously been developed with an industrial building that has been removed, leaving us with a gravel lot. The prior conditions were non-conforming with regard to lot depth, front yard setback, rear yard setback, side yard setback, building coverage, impervious coverage, and unoccupied open space. Right now, only that lot depth variance condition persists because, as I said, this is just a lot full of gravel. The applicant is proposing to construct an office and warehouse building with associated parking and loading and landscaping and signage and lighting. And the site's located in an industrial area, in an industrial zoning district, so the use is permitted and appropriate for this property. But we are requesting some bulk variance relief to allow for this development, and that includes the lot depth, which is an existing condition, front yard setback, just at that little bit at the corner in the front, rear yard setback, eliminating that side yard setback that had existed previously, but we're still looking at building coverage, impervious coverage, and unoccupied open space. Now, variance relief for this type of variance is known as the bulk or the C variances, and there are two tests in the municipal land use law for this type of variance. The first is the C1 standard. It's commonly called hardship, and that's when something that's unique to a lot's existing shape, topographic conditions, legal pre-existing structures creates a situation where the strict application of the ordinance would result in hardship. And then there's a second standard, the C2 standard. It's commonly called the flexible C standard, and this is justified when the purposes of the municipal land use law are being advanced by the requested variances, and the benefits of the variance substantially outweigh the detriments. As you put it, and I'm going to be stealing in the future, this is when you can comply, but asking for variance really produces a better product. So this is the variance for that standard. It's my opinion that the variances we're looking at tonight, some of them can be granted under the C1 hardship standard, and some of them can be granted under that C2 flexible C standard. So looking first at the C1 hardship, the lot depth, the front yard setback, a little bit of that rear yard setback can be granted under the C1 standard because there is hardship that creates the need for these variances. The lot depth nonconformity is an existing condition. The ordinance requires 100 foot of lot depth, and because we have that jog in the front line, the subject site has a depth of 95 feet. The lot itself is unusually shaped at the one corner. There's a small bit cut off at that one corner. And this irregular lot line at the frontage results in a small portion of the building front extending into the front yard at just this point. It's my opinion that the relief that's being requested here is also de minimis because it's just a small corner of the building. But the majority of the building along the frontage is well behind the required 10-foot front yard setback. So we have an existing shallow depth and an unusual shape on the front of the lot, which means there's less lot depth available for this building. The building extends as a result of that 5 feet into the rear yard, which is equal to the amount of the lot depth by which the lot is deficient. And the building itself would actually fit within the required setback lines, but for the fact that corner of the front has resulted in us moving that building back 5 feet from where it had previously been approved to reduce the impact along the frontage. So that's it for hardship. Then if we look at it under the C2 standard, the flexible C variance, there are two purposes of the municipal land use law that are being advanced here. The first is purpose G, with regard to providing an appropriate use in an appropriate location. It's an industrial building in an industrial park. And purpose J, with regard to promoting a desirable visual environment. And looking at that a little more intently, what we have here is an application that could be more conforming if the applicant didn't cover that loading dock. And enclosing that activity provides a more desirable visual environment, as well as pushing the building off the frontage and into the rear yard setback, also allows for greater landscaping along the frontage, also providing a more desirable visual environment. So it's my opinion that the benefits that are associated with this site plan, with the variances, substantially outweigh any detriments. The benefits in this case include redeveloping the site with a viable and appropriate industrial use, a visual improvement to the character of the area through the additional landscaping, the improved architecture, and enclosing all of the business activities on the site, provision of more than adequate parking supply, removing the parking of the site from the surrounding roadways, and improving stormwater management for this lot by providing a stormwater management system where none had previously existed. It's my opinion that there's no negative impact that results from the variances that are being requested. There are two potential impacts that could result from the variances that we're looking at for setback and coverage. The degradation of your visual environment and the impact on stormwater management. There's no impact in this case to the visual environment that's negative. The proposed building is a significant improvement over what had previously existed on the site. The building conforms to the visible front yard setback in all but the slightest intrusion at one corner, and the applicant is installing significant landscaping to enhance the visual character of the site along the frontage where it matters most. There's no impact to stormwater drainage. So though we're over on coverage, the applicant is proposing a stormwater management system which will mitigate the excess coverage and improve the prior conditions. The potential impact, there might be some relief that's required for the distance between the two driveways. That could also have an impact on safety. If that relief is required, one driveway is a loading zone, which would have limited traffic, not a driveway that serves an active parking lot. And the minimum nature of the traffic that's proposed in this case would ensure that there would be no detriment resulting from those driveways being 27 and a half feet as opposed to 30 feet apart. So it's my opinion here that the benefits substantially outweigh the detriments. The last test, I promise this is the last one for variance relief, is whether or not you substantially impair the intent and purpose of your master plan and zoning ordinance. In this case, the use and the structures are permitted and appropriate, and the applicant advances several purposes of your master plan with regard to retaining existing commercial establishments by fostering a positive regulatory climate, strengthening the appearance of commercial districts by adopting design and landscape ordinances, and encouraging the development of the borough's economic base by expanding the number of permitted uses to generate employment growth, increase property values, and promote the improvement of underutilized properties. All of these purposes indicate to me as a planner that what the borough would like is to improve your economic base, allow for commercial and industrial uses to flourish in the town, and that is the nature of this application.
Thank you very much. Anyone have any questions for this planner? For Allison Coffin?
Yes.
No? See none? Gentlemen? None? All right.
Okay, thank you, Allison.
Well, that concludes this portion. I think before we make any decisions, we're going to open this meeting to the public.
We'll make a motion to open the meeting to the public to speak on this application.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. David, second by Mr. Grimaldi. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. How you doing, sir?
Good evening. Bob Donovan at the McElroy firm. I represent SJS Holdings. They're the owner of 2 Mark Road. Mr. Savino is here. He was here at the initial hearing. And I had candid conversations with Mr. Hale, the applicant's counsel. And I've given the board our letter and set forth the concerns that Mr. Savino has about this application. And we are withdrawing that objection based on an agreement. I don't want to, characterize the testimony other than to say that the testimony is what it is, and it certainly appeared that there was the potential for this application not to be involving use for warehouse, but perhaps for something else. And as long as if the board is inclined to grant this application, we would like some level of assurance or some level of condition in there to make sure it's clear that the approval based on the use of warehouse were so designated in the application. And that was the kind of conversation I had with Mr. Hale, and we memorialized that in a letter to the board, I think, yesterday.
So your letter states that the condition would read...
I could read it if you'd like.
Well, I had it, but I just want to clarify with you because I heard you say something there and I want to be sure I'm getting it, that you would not object to this if the space was used for warehouse only.
Correct.
Okay.
Well, not the whole space.
No, I think if I can...
That's what I
understand.
heard just now.
I didn't hear that.
Oh, well, that's what I heard.
I think Mr. Donovan and his client would like it to be used for what we say it's going to be used for.
Right, so the
Okay.
office space
Is
is
office
there,
space.
and there's office space, and the
The-
warehouse is warehouse.
Exactly.
That's what I
Because
heard.
the concern was parking. So they wanted to make sure that we weren't going to use half the warehouse space for assembly, refurbishing, other things that would generate a higher parking calculation.
Have you discussed this with your client?
Yes.
And?
And he's okay. I mean, as you remember last time, he said, well, this, and we said, look, this is the application. You want to do something different? Go back to the board in a couple
Okay,
months.
so he's on
So
board.
that, yes, so he is on board.
So the way the application is being presented, you're okay with that?
Yes,
As long as we approve it that way?
absolutely.
And he's okay with that?
Yes.
As long as
Yes.
what's on here is what we approve.
Which is no more or less than what they said.
What's that?
Approve something else.
Chairman,
I'm sorry?
I'm sorry, excuse me.
Yeah, so the board doesn't think we're making a mountain out of a molehill. In the letter, we did address, there was some testimony that there could be refurbishing of material at this facility, and that was the cause for concern, given the fact that parking is such a premium. It certainly appeared that there was, the applicant was holding out for a potential use other than warehouse. So that's why we wanted to be totally transparent about this and say, you know, we're going to object, but if you're saying that what's being designated as warehouse will only be for warehouse, not light industrial or anything else, we'll withdraw our objection, and we would like if there is a variance granted, the resolution to so reflect that, because the testimony from the applicant is what it is. So that was the basis for the objection and the agreement.
And, could I ask a question? Sure. Now, in your discussions with Ms. Marcus' client, do you both agree on do you both agree on what the definition of warehousing is? I'm assuming it's just passive storage?
Correct, that's our position.
If a guy hammers a nail in that area, in your view, is that not warehouse? I mean,
Well,
I don't want to get into the woods here, but I just want to make sure you two
yeah.
and the board understands what warehousing means.
Well, you know, from our perspective, when the testimony is that the applicant said that they performed step operations and then later testified that that refers to refurbishing escalator steps, refurbishing material clearly would not be, in my estimation, warehouse. It would be more akin to light industrial. So that's really the trigger point. And then when we were told that, no, they will just be using it solely for warehouse, from our perspective, to answer your question, Mr. Rago, that would exclude refurbishing activities. Hammering a nail, you know, that's another ballgame. But that was the trigger point of our client's concerns, my client's concerns.
This application says office light manufacturing. It says it right on here.
Well, and we talked about that
And
in
it says
last
warehouse.
hearing, right? So it's, I think the issue that you have is that it's going to be manufacturing, which would be a whole nother ballgame. And a whole nother parking calculation. Our application is what it is.
Well, that's what needs to be clarified, I think, because the application is exactly what it is, and it's transparent. If you read through the application, and I'm not aware of, however, what you might be, you and Team Hale and their team, the two teams, A and B, what A and B may be coming to an agreement on is all nice and nice, but if it contradicts this application.
No, it does not. So that light assembly office, that's the 2,040
And it's
square
on there.
feet. Right, and it's on there. So I think what Mr. Donovan and his client is saying is the 11-something thousand square feet that's for warehouse stays warehouse. And you don't take any of that office or light assembly and move it into the warehouse space, because now you're looking at a more parking demand. Now, and I said, we talked about this, we can't really anyway, because the parking calculation is different. We require more parking in another parking variance, so. I
So
guess
the light assembly is still in tow, right? We're doing
The
it.
2,000 square feet.
The 2,000 square feet.
Yes, that's what we're limited to.
And that's your understanding as well? 11,000 plus what it plus minus remains?
Is that your understanding?
Warehousing.
Wait a minute.
Yeah.
Can I come forward?
Sure.
Okay.
We're gonna need to swear you in.
Yeah, I'm Frank Savino.
What, could you raise your right hand,
Yes, sir.
please, with regard to, okay. With regard to this application, do you swear that your comments and testimony shall be the truth? So.
I do.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Mr.
Frank
Sa-
Savino?
I just wanted to, I think there's some confusion here, perhaps, I'm kind of listening as you are. There are definitions for warehouse, and there are definitions for what you might call light manufacturing or assembly. And so warehouse is a passive storage of goods, whereas light manufacturing or the other activities, which I think were described by the property owner, the applicant, more closely, I think, fits into light manufacturing. And as such, if that classification were indeed to be applied to this application, the parking requirements would be substantially different by a factor of about 2, okay? So instead of only requiring 22 spots, they're claiming that they don't need a variance for, which is true, it is indeed a warehouse, but if it turns out to be a light manufacturing facility, now the calculation goes to over 40. So we're always saying that, fine, the application, it is what it is, but we don't want to see, just for the sake of getting the building built, that they're misrepresenting what their intentions are, that they're really going to do manufacturing, but they're saying they're going to be doing warehousing. So what we're saying is if they say they're going to do warehousing and the definition is defined in the code, then there's no issue. But if they're going to be doing manufacturing, then they should be saying that they're doing manufacturing, and that should be the subject of whether there should be an approval or not. Okay, so I think that maybe clarifies, I think there was a little bit of confusion of what our point was.
So if this application is approved, that 2,000 plus square feet.
No, we're not talking about the 2,000 square feet, that's office. We're talking
about the
warehouse.
That's what we're saying. That 2,000 square feet is listed as office/light manufacturing.
Okay. So
Just at 2,040 square feet.
right, okay. But if they're bringing in escalators that are very big objects in tractor trailers, they're not going into that 2,000 square foot warehouse.
We get that, we get it. We're just trying to clarify.
Okay.
Now, let's just say this application is approved, and they're allowed to do some light work there in that 2,000 square feet. We're not, at the end of the day, we're not policing that.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, you know,
I mean, you may be that.
we want to be cooperative.
Okay.
And not impede anybody's business, but at the same time, we don't want to have a situation where we have.
It impedes your business.
It impedes my business.
Sure,
okay?
sure, it's an impact.
And it's really going to come down to, if they've got 22 parking spots that they've allocated now, and at the last hearing, it was indicated that they're going to have 20 people working in the warehouse, and then potentially some office people Well, now that kind of puts them over that, what they've got now, of 22 spots minus the one for the handicap, which maybe we got a little bit of wiggle room there, but if it turns out that they are underestimating their 20 quantity, and maybe it's really more like 30, and maybe they're going to have 6 people in the office, and now we've got 36 people reporting to work in cars, and we've got 22 spots, and we're 12 parking spots short. Now there's going to be jockeying and conflict for street parking. So that's my point, is that, we would expect them to accurately represent what they're going to be doing, which they did, and if their category should be some other category which has a different calculation, that's what ought to be done. But if they're saying, hey, we're going to do warehouse, we'd expect them to do what warehousing definition is and not do something else later on. That's our point.
And it's a good one.
Okay?
Yep.
All right, thank you.
Yes.
If it helps everybody, our ordinance defines clearly warehouse as well as limited manufacturing. And those definitions are in the ordinance, and they can be referred to as part of the resolution.
Okay.
Is warehousing described in part as passive storage of goods?
Shall I read it?
Sure. Just so we're on the same page, yeah.
Warehouse, by the way, this is page 7070 of the ordinance. A building for the storage and redistribution of commercial or industrial products and materials, but shall not include truck terminals where products or materials are directly transferred between trucks. If direct sales to the public are made from such storage building, it shall be classified as a warehouse outlet. So storage and redistribution, those are the key terms. And
Which is at the
limited
beginning.
manufacturing, which is on page 42 of the ordinance, states the fabrication, processing, or assembly of goods and materials, or the storage of bulk goods and materials, where such activities, goods, or materials create no major hazard from fire or explosion, produce no toxic or corrosive fumes, gas, smoke, or odors, produce no obnoxious dust or vapors, produce no offensive noise or vibrations, glare, flashes, or objectionable effluent, or produce no danger from radiation. So there's the fabrication, processing, and assembly of goods and materials, and the storage of bulk goods and materials.
And if I could just ask, and what are the parking requirements for each one of those occupancy classifications or use group classifications?
Well, we know them, because we've done it 1,000 times.
It's like 1,000 for one, and like
It's
400,
1,000
yeah.
for warehousing
And 400,
and
yeah.
400.
So it's, warehousing doesn't require a lot of people. Manufacturing requires a lot of people. So that's my only point.
Mr. Grimaldi, can you read that caption that's on the plan for me one more time?
On the site plan, we have a listing, a breakdown of the square footage. Warehouse is listed as 11,450 square feet. The next division is office/light manufacturing, which is 2,040 square feet. And the remainder is loading dock of 1,350 square feet for a total of 14,840 square feet.
Okay, so the reason I asked him to read that is because exactly what you're asking is already on the plan, so it's not a form of a condition. If this was to be approved, he has to abide by the plan, am I correct?
Yeah, that's what I said.
Yeah, so it's not a condition at this point. If that's approved, it's already in there that we wouldn't look at it any other way. Is that the way you're seeing it, Mr. Donovan, or are you asking for a condition?
Well, I think that because of the testimony of the applicant, where he held out for potentially, in our view, doing light industrial work, or manufacturing work in the warehouse, and since we formally objected and then withdrew the objection, I would like that reflected somehow, so we can memorialize, what happened. Whether it's a condition, I understand the application is what it is. The four corners would dictate, but just the history somehow showing that there was an objection withdrawn based on this understanding.
Well, there's a bit of redundancy there, but I'm sure we could accommodate something. I just don't, a condition is usually above and beyond or something like that. And I understand your concern, it makes sense, because there was testimony, yes.
In the event the board were to approve the application, and I asked the public counsel this, the protocol being that the applicant then submits a proposed resolution for the board to consider.
No,
You do? No. No, and the draft, I thought that,
the board drafts the resolution and we circulate it.
He's asking when we get it from you,
Oh.
circulate it
Oh.
to him, or you could do it to both of us.
in other words, I can make suggested, caveat language, so to speak, for the board to consider? Is that-
That's normally given if the applicant's attorney, if you want to look at the resolution, the board will do what it needs to do, but if you want to suggest a tweak somewhere, then that's fine.
But I don't think the board has a problem.
No, that's a normal course.
Normal course of action. It's in there. So really, if this board approves this, he's got to follow the rules, right? More or less.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
If it helps the board, I can explain in a couple of minutes what our client does.
Hold on. Before you do that, maybe we could close this portion to the public?
Sorry.
Anyone else from the public wishing to speak? Seeing none?
I make a motion to close the public portion of the hearing.
I'll second it.
Okay, motion made by Mr. David, second by Mr. Grimaldi, all in favor? Aye. Okay, we're back.
So, as you know, Precision Escalator makes parts for escalators. No escalators ever come into the facility, whether that facility, his facility on Michigan Avenue, he only has parts. When he talked about refurbishing, maybe, I don't remember using that word, but maybe he did use that word. But I think they get some parts together, they probably put them together and ship them out to the customers. So that's why we wanted the option of the light assembly in there. Since Mr. Marukian has bought, or in the process of buying 515 Michigan, so that would be his third building. And I don't think we're gonna have to come to this board, I would say, but I think he changed a little bit about, well, where am I gonna put all my operations and how am I gonna do it? And it was kind of, the testimony was really in the moment of, well, and you guys know Greg and you've seen Greg and he's kind of all over the place. He's a business, owns a business. So we have talked to him several times. We said, this is your application. You want to do more manufacturing, you want to do more assembly, then we come back to the board. So he understands that, we understand that, and we've also explained it to the objectors as well. So I hope that that helps kind of clear it up and why we did what we did.
So the odds of this building being another application down the road to make it bigger is probably not too high.
No, we won't make it bigger. He would just change the use. So we change, and we have to come back for use and parking if that's what he needed. But I don't know that that's what he needs. So right now, we're not doing that. This is what we started with, this is what we're going with, and that's our application.
Okay. Does anyone from the board have any questions for the planner, the architect, the attorney, or our planner and engineer? Okay, seeing none, I guess maybe we need to have some of our discussion, where we are and what we're going, because I know there was two concerns here with Mr. Grimaldi and Nick Pantina.
I don't want to come off as I'm selling this job. I'm just...
But you're making good points.
I listened to what they were saying last time, and I kind of listened to what we kind of insinuated we were looking for, and knowing what we have a lot of spaces that this one bay would get taken off. They wouldn't build it. There'd just be that concrete mess at the end. And he's not choosing to do that, so I appreciate that. And he can make it almost, except for the depth of that truck, and if this was a depth of a 100-foot lot, then the depth of the 100-foot lot and the truck would make his building work. But that 100-foot lot, which, I mean, he dedicates 2 pages to, showing the turning movements, that it's not his opinion. He has proof on his drawings that the depth of the tractor trailer coming into here, the reason for this building to get pushed back. We all hated that bump. I hated that bump when he showed it to us. It makes that very confining street even feel more confining. He took that suggestion, he did something else. It results in another variance, but it's the lesser of two evils of variances, and there is substantial benefit of our streetscape to the front. You know, architecturally, I'd love a lot more things done, but it's a warehouse. So it's nice, he has, architecturally, there's an entrance now. That's what we asked him for. We got an entrance.
Anyone else?
Yeah, advancing, I guess, the, what the master plan is looking for economically, I think we all agree that we're dealing with a known entity here that's coming in, doubling down in this industrial area, and I think I heard tripling down.
Yes.
So to me, that's a little bit of an offset too, for a little bit that we may be giving up.
Anyone else?
No, I mean, if no one else is, I'll make a motion to approve the application with conditions, that were stated, and we can ask Mr. O'Brien to, hopefully he jotted them down and.
Yeah. Well, before you make that motion, I just want to say something before we go there, if you don't mind. Did you have something as well?
Yeah, I just want to say that listening to all the proofs and the discussions, and several of you have worked with me for the longest time, and I tend to observe what we have in the ordinances, and I want to push for compliance, but I guess short of revealing the westerly side of the building, that's a positive to float toward the flexibility on this.
Okay.
It's my-
Just to make my statement is that, to be honest with you, initially, I was probably not in favor of approving the application, even in its revised format, until listening to my colleagues discuss and ultimately change my opinion. So anyway, to move it along, I'm putting the motion out there.
Well, before you do that, I also have a statement to make. So I am in total agreement with everything Mr. David just said. However, I am very happy that we have discussed this with Mr. Grimaldi and Mr. Pantina, who really gave us that exercise going back and forth, because this was very close to all of us feeling the same way. You have a square box, you have a lot, let's get conformed. But given the testimony and everything that your team has shed a little bit of a different light. So I just also wanted to make that clear. And picking up on the ADA parking, that's very important. However, we're in a different state now. So right now, I'm very happy to hear what everybody's input was, because that really enabled us to make a good decision here tonight.
So we need a second.
Somebody get a second?
I'll second the motion.
Okay, the motion was made by Mr. David, second by Mr. Mazzio. Roll call, please.
Could we hear the conditions?
Oh, we didn't hear the conditions, did we?
No, we do need to.
Oh, I'm sorry. So some of the conditions that was set forth, do you have a list? Because I have a list as well, so go ahead.
I'll see.
Add windows to the east wall,
Yes,
add a red stripe to the corner treatment,
yes.
remove the sign illumination over the entry, keep the gooseneck lamp, and add the underhang lamp.
I just want to not remove this sign.
Yeah, remove the illuminated.
Remove the illuminated.
Within the sign.
Illumination, not the
Within the
sign.
sign, you said over the sign, I think.
Thank you very much. Right, remove the illumination of the sign.
The sign itself, yes.
The internal illumination.
Internal, that's
There you go.
correct, yeah.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
So leave the ADA as it is. That can be, just leave it as it is. Specify warehousing, light manufacturing, office, and loading. Define those areas in the resolution, which are also defined in the architectural plans. And that's what I've done.
Last month, no, I agree with Kevin, last month I picked up two other conditions. I think we talked about deer tolerant plantings, is that still on the table?
They take care of it.
Okay.
They followed his recommendation.
No overnight parking on the subject property? I had something about that.
That's good.
And did you do the colors too?
Yes.
Multicolors, yes, on the red stripe.
And the red stripe, can't forget.
3 red stripe roll.
Rutgers red?
Yes.
Okay.
Was it Rutgers red?
Given those conditions and the motion on, that was made, can we go to roll call now?
Mr. Shilkey?
Yes.
Mr. Paserno?
Yes.
Mr. David?
Yes.
Mr. Grimaldi?
Yes.
Mr. Cantina?
Yes.
Mr. Colello?
Yes.
Mr. Mazzio?
Yes.
And Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Very good. Congratulations.
Thank you very much. Thanks for all your input, hard work. Appreciate it.
Thanks for doing a good job tonight.
Yeah.
Okay, any comments for the good of the board? All right, seeing none. Someone make a motion to...
I make a motion to open the meeting to the public.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. David, second by Mr. Shelkey. All in favor? Aye. Anyone here? Seeing none?
I make a motion to close the public portion of the meeting.
Second. Opened by Mr. David, second by Mr. Grimaldi. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion
And I make a
adjourned.
motion to adjourn.
I second. All in favor? Aye.